So, Squid Game Season 2, actually quite a good season. I wanted to honor it in some way by talking about its most memorable scene, according to myself. And the most memorable scene for me was the Russian roulette scene between Gi-hoon and the recruiter. There are a lot of interesting things about this scene, so let's just get right into it, because we're gonna have a bit of fun. The scene begins as Gi-hoon comes back from his manhunt for the recruiter. When he arrives at his own doorstep, he realizes the neon lights of his headquarters are on, which means someone is in there and he has no idea who. The setting for this scene feels very dark and isolated in this abandoned place at night, with only neon lights to clear the viewer's sight. It will remain as such for the rest of the scene, pushing forward the ominous presence of the recruiter. How scary must it be to think for years that you're the predator, that you're finally going to get your hands on your prey, and you just realize at the last moment that you were the prey all along, and the predator found your den. And the man doesn't shy from showing his domination as well. When he encounters him, Gi-hoon finds the recruiter showing his back to him, sipping his drink. He's confident, he won, and he's enjoying every bit of it. To add to his aura, there is something chilling about the recruiter harboring an agreeable smile while having blood on his face, like casually. If you add to that his impenetrable, agreeable front, his impeccable dressing and posture, there is definitely an unsettling vibe coming from all these barriers between you and who he truly is. When Gi-hoon states that he didn't take the plane because he saw the recruiter at the last second, you can sense a vibrant animosity between the two characters that goes beyond Gi-hoon's disdain for the Squid Games, if you will. This is a confrontation of ideals, but also, this is very personal. At the beginning of the interaction, you can sense that the conversation is falsely civil, and you can also see what both of these characters' goals are. Gi-hoon wants to find a way to reach the higher-ups of the Squid Games organization, and the recruiter wants to prevent him from doing that while also showing him that he's superior to him. And Gi-hoon doesn't shy away from letting his ego come up because he loosely insults the recruiter, calling him a hound for his masters and all that sorts, in order to try to get to the recruiter's ego. But the recruiter stays calm and composed and very egocentric by completely ignoring what Gi-hoon is saying and talking about himself and his past. The recruiter's infatuation, if you will, for his job, and he says it himself, comes from a place of low self-esteem and need for recognition that gave birth to some sort of a superiority complex. We can understand with him finding his own father in the game that he comes from a family that already has money problems, and I think his family is no stranger to the vision that he has now of the world. That's why when Gi-hoon keeps on calling him a lapdog, you can feel that it strikes a nerve, no matter how hard he tries to stay composed. And that's when the fight takes its flight. Both characters are going to try to prove their point to each other. Gi-hoon is going to try to prove that the recruiter is no better than all the players that have come in the Squid Games. And the recruiter will try to prove his superiority to Gi-hoon, who, according to the recruiter, even if he won the Squid Games, is still trash like all the other players. And when our protagonist pushes his enemy to the edge by saying that he would never know what it's like to actually play deadly games like the Squid Game, that's when the recruiter proposes a game. And the recruiter's goal is to prove that even as a player, he's better than a Squid Game winner. He's better than all the trashes. As such, the game will be Russian roulette, which is basically all about, do you have the guts to carry on? Which is exactly what Gi-hoon was trying to prove to the recruiter, that he doesn't have the guts. As the game begins, we can note another touch of cold elegance to mask the truth within, when the recruiter puts on some music in the background. You will notice throughout this scene the red window in the background. I love how it feels like a window to hell at arm's reach for the one who will lose this, because both characters here do have blood on their hands. As they're shooting the gun one by one, you can feel and you can see the pressure of the game, giving little cracks there and there in both of their postures, and credit to the actors because it's really well acted and we understand that perfectly. I feel like it's very gripping. I mean, just look at the recruiter's face. I feel like that's showing the real anguish behind the mask. Of course, the nature of the game itself makes the pressure go rampant as it progresses. Who will break first? Will someone even break in the first place? And taunts after taunts, they keep mocking each other to progress, to keep going. And this twisted dance of egos is getting them closer and closer to death's reach. This dance gets almost sensual in a twisted way when the recruiter leans forward to put the gun in his mouth and shoot for the 4th time. It's really weird, but also really fascinating. You will note that even though the recruiter is trying to prove that Gi-hun is trash like all the other players, there is a paradoxical respect for Gi-hun because he's putting his life in Gi-hun's hands, which is not something that I don't think anyone would do for anybody. If Gi-hun shoots him, he dies, but he proves his point, which is the final taunt that he tries to defeat Gi-hun with, until the gun fires, and he's put in front of the final dilemma: shoot himself and keep until the very end his vision of superiority that he wouldn't cheat his way out of the game like Gi-hun taunted him to do, or cheat but lose the battle of ideology. At this moment, his ego pushes him to die. Either way, both characters won in that instance, in a way. Gi-hun didn't make the recruiter admit that he was no better than the others, but at least he's got the contact info to reach the higher-ups and the frontmen of the Squid Games. In the meantime, the recruiter died with his code and ego unspoiled. For the overarching narrative now of the scene and the meaning that it has for the show, I think the writers here are laying the path for Gi-hun to be confronted about his contradictions. Remember that his goal is to fight the Squid Games and shut them down. Yet here he played by the rules of the very persons that lead the Squid Game, without any guarantee at the beginning of the game that he would get what he needs for his mission. He could actually lose it all. If he died, his whole life redemption mission would have vanished. Or more precisely, if the recruiter died, he lost the one and only lead that he had to infiltrate the Squid Games. Because you gotta remember, at the beginning of the game, he didn't know yet that the recruiter had the invitation in his pocket. He did succumb to the ego fight with the recruiter, but most importantly, to the thrill of gambling, and these to the cost of his whole life mission. And here we're exposed to the fact that despite everything that happened, Gi-hun's gambling addiction is still kicking strong, and that makes him kind of hypocritical in a way, because he wants to fight the Squid Games, yet he plays by their rules, partly out of ego and also partly out of thrill. To be fair with Gi-hun though, I think he expected to have access to the frontman and the Squid Games if he played by the rules with the recruiter, and not if he cheated, because I think he expected to be surveilled. Hence why he didn't just take the gun when he could and unloaded it on the recruiter and, like, I don't know, torture him and try to find answers or whatnot. And the neatly enveloped invitation kind of proved him right, because there is very little chances that this invitation was destined to the recruiter with how neatly it was enveloped. Well, the recruiter actually even made sure that Gi-hun would know about the invitation while they were playing the Russian roulette game. Though I will say it is a bit of a stretch writing-wise, especially with Gi-hun having no guarantee that following the rules would lead to an invitation. I think this is the only explanation possible. This scene is a criticism of Gi-hun's moral code, and there will be other scenes like this throughout Season 2. You will see. As Squid Game in general is a critique of capitalism, with a lot of players being painted as fine with the falling of others as long as they make it, this scene makes no exception. The recruiter lives in a bubble where he thinks he's superior to the others, when in fact he's enchained just like all the other people he perceives as below him, being the puppet for his rich masters. On the other side of it, Gi-hun's grand morality calling doesn't change the fact that he plays the game, just like the monsters he's trying to shut down. Everyone is enslaved to the system here one way or another, except the ones at the very top, the Squid Game investors, who are enjoying the entertainment of this rat race. And let's not forget about us, viewers, who are directly compared to these rich investors. Aren't we entertained by these people's misery? I mean, we didn't create the game, sure, but we are perfectly fine watching and even craving for that drama. I mean, let's be honest. We're in no position to judge the characters in this show. A pretty bleak picture that this scene and this show in general is painting. Will Gi-hoon adopt this vision of human beings being awful by nature? I guess we'll see in the rest of the series. But in the meantime, that was it for today. I had a lot of fun with this scene. Really cool scene, really well acted, a lot of emotions. The writing is a bit of a stretch sometimes, but I think we can forgive it. So I'll see you for another cool scene another time.